All right, we're back. A rare downgrade today for AMD. Barclays says the growth story needs a pause. We've made it our call of the day because you just don't get downgrades to AMD that much. Stock's down 23% year to date. You can see the decline today of 7.33%. Very interesting take today from Jim Cramer, who, as you know, loves the job that CEO Lisa Su has done. Loves it. Even so,
I said yesterday the Chapel Trust would sell it if it could, sell some. And the reason why is because when you look at we've been restricted. When you look at the breakdown of AMD, you've got gaming, which we think has weakened. You've got PC, which is weakened, but you've got high-performance computing, which is strong, and then you've got the merger with Xilinx, which we don't know how it's going to come out.
Josh, what do you think here? I mean, here's somebody who truly thinks the CEO is an absolute all-star and would have sold a little bit if he could, just because of the fundamental environment may not be that great, at least in the very near term.
You know, we do a lot on CNBC talking about buy versus sell, and a lot of times the right answer is hold. And I think good investing requires you to keep two opposing thoughts in your head at the same time in certain cases. And this is one of them. So on the one hand, you can say Lisa Su's doing a great job and AMD is a great company, and I don't think anybody could really argue that. But you also sometimes would have to say all of that might be true, and 2022 just might not be a great year for the stock. So as an investor, can you handle that? If you're a trader, you don't have time for that. You're out. So I think you have to know what you are. The takeaway from this note for me, the analyst from Barclays cutting the stock, talking about heightened competition in their big end markets, PCs most importantly. And basically, this is the takeaway quote. We don't have a smoking gun pointing to a correction underway in any of these markets, but it's very clear to us that all three segments are running at elevated levels, meaning things are probably as good as they can be. The core issue here is, what will AMD's growth trajectory be on the other side? And the only way to know that is, tell me how competitive ARM Holdings and Intel are going to be in 24, 25. Well, we already know Intel is going to be more competitive and more aggressive than they've been in 25 years. That's what they're telling us. ARM Holdings is a little bit of a wild card. They almost became part of NVIDIA and didn't. How energized is that management now to prove that they should be a standalone company? I guess we'll see what happens, but I think it's a reasonable note and sentiment that the analyst is expressing.
I need to hear from Jenny because, look, part of this call is that Intel, to Josh's point, is going to play all this catch-up. Now, Cramer threw out an interesting thing, too. Speculation more than anything else is that Intel's going to spend all this money. They're going to, try and onshore some of their chip production, et cetera. And he threw out, does that put the dividend at risk in any way, which is your bread and butter?
Right. So I'll start with the dividend, which is it's probably not at risk. Interestingly, Intel's in our growth portfolio, not our dividend portfolio. So if Pat Gelsinger ultimately decides, hey, a better use for this cash is not paying the whole dividend, fine. But they've paid a dividend for 29 consecutive years. They've raised the dividend for 19 years. And we also know that the free cash flow diminishment as they invest all this money in these new foundries is very finite. And after 2025, the free cash flow completely explodes. So I think it's unlikely that they cut the dividend. What I thought was interesting about this note was actually that it's a bigger picture. And if you remember, Scott, when I was on Tuesday, we were talking about Goldman downgrading the whole semi space because they're saying, hey, these are cyclical. And then you get into the idea of that Charlie Munger quote, right, where he says something to the extent of, any great company can be a bad investment just by raising the price. And I think that's where we are with AMD, and that's where we are with this note right now. People are stepping back and saying like, oh, hey, guess what? We remember that semis are cyclical now. And when they're cyclical, maybe they don't deserve to trade at 30 times earnings. Maybe they deserve to trade at 25 or 20. And so there's that difference between Lisa Su's an amazing manager. AMD's an amazing company, but the share price went up too much. So I think we're going to see more of this pressure across semis overall. And then we step back and say, all right, Intel's trading at 10 times. Teradyne, which we talked about on Tuesday, is at 18 times. Have those accounted for the cyclicality? Probably yes. Has AMD, has NVIDIA? Maybe not yet. And that's where even within semis, you need to start to get a lot more granular.
Okay, so a minute ago, Jim Cramer tweeted, I want in on AMD. And when Jim wants in, Jim gets in. Jim Cramer's on the phone.
Scott, this is a classically great discussion that the investment committee is having. And, I mean, you know, when I listen to Josh, it's absolutely right. You got to be kind of look of two minds. The problem I have with AMD and why we had to sell some, first of all, it became too big in our fund because it was so successful. That's always a nice, high-quality problem. But I also felt that it was going to be downgraded after listening to Sanjay Mehrotra on Squawk on the Street because he did not tell the story right about what he's up to. He basically told a story about how PCs aren't that good.
And that's at Micron.
Yes, and that hurt the story because, remember, Lisa Su has both enterprise PC, but she also has consumer PC, and she has gaming. And I'm still trying to get my arms around whether gaming has ticked down. That is what I'm really concerned about. Not high-performance computing, not the new areas that she gets with Xilinx, which include defense, which is terrific, and some auto. But there is just a concern that the street has turned on this group. And I know I don't like to be able to take my cue from what the street does, but they can really pound you over time. And when you see a price cut from 148 to 115, it completely freaks people out because that says basically you should short it. So I say give this one its due. Let her buy back stock after it's come down a bunch.
Which you said she would this morning. You said she would, right? She'd buy it hand over fist.
But I also think, you know, candidly, as I said this to subscribers to the CNBC Investing Club, I have too many semis. I got too much semi exposure. And that's not a good thing at this point when someone who reports a huge upside surprise like Micron did tells a story that gets the stock down 10. So obviously the stars are not aligned to help this group unless you're auto, unless you're 5G, unless you're high-performance computing and nothing else, your stock's going to be in for some crossfire here.
So what's a more reasonable price? But then I'm also thinking that if Lisa Su does what you say she probably will and buys back shares, you've got a floor under the stock by the mere fact that she would do that.
Yeah, well, I think that does. I mean, look, the issue is that let's say they do $4 this year, and they'll probably do more than that. But, you know, do you really will it really go to, say, 20 times earnings? I don't think so. But it was at 40 times earnings. And there you start thinking, wow, does it have that maintainable growth when you've got a desperate man like Pat Gelsinger? He's desperate. And he could cut prices and cut prices. You know, AMD's got this great Ryzen chip. But what do you do with a guy who is really just after cash flow? And needs business, like Pat Gelsinger, who's on some sort of messianic cause to save the American.
Such a great
right?
point.
He's messianic. And so when he's messianic, he doesn't care about what price he sells things. And I, as a rational business person, look at what he's doing and saying, darn it, he's against Lisa Su. I wish he were against something else. But he seems to be pulling out all the stops in order to be able to be the American semiconductor, including giving away some of his lower-end chips and even some of his higher-end chips.
Which is one of the reasons why, and Jenny, you know, I want to get you into the conversation with Jim, too. And briefly, if you could, I mean, that's one of the reasons why you continue to back that story amid what has been so much negativity and so many headwinds. To Jim's point, Jenny, Pat Gelsinger ain't playing around anymore.
Yeah, but I also, Jim, you know, with all due respect, and I think it's kind of a fool's errand to argue with you, but I'm going to do it anyway. But I think that's not the right assessment. I don't think he's desperate. I think he's motivated and invigorated. And when you say he's, you know, cash flow at any cost, I don't think that's the right way to look at it either. Nor do I think, and this has been my argument on us being long Intel from the beginning, I don't think he wants to dominate the whole American semi space. There is room for all of these players. And when we talked earlier for a second about taking market share, like there's desperate need for semis in every area. Gaming, if it slows temporarily. I don't even know if it slows, but there's room for Intel forever. There's room for AMD and NVIDIA and Micron. There's room for all these guys forever. So to me, this is just a giant expanding pie.
Part of the point, part of the point, and Jim, you know, I'll toss it to you. I think there were real doubts as to whether there was room for Intel for a while, right?
I'm still doubting.
There couldn't be. They were earning $21 billion of free cash flow. Guys,
what happens if they take all that free cash flow and decide to build as many plants as possible in Ohio? Okay, maybe the word instead of desperate. How about
the world
irrational? Man, the man wants to make America great again. through Intel. And that is great if he wants to use every penny of his cash flow. But there are also things called shareholders. And this man is, like I said, the word is he's messianic. And that requires an irrational spend.
I disagree.
You disagree? Well, you got to talk to what he's saying
I
when he
view
was
it
at
as
the
not that he
SIA.
wants.
I mean, he's speaking a lot about the need to be able to, bring us back again, and the greatness, and Intel's the great one. And look, Intel's an okay company. They do make a lot of money every single day. But what I'm saying is, I don't know if I want to compete with them at this moment. Because he just, I mean, what is with the Ohio and the 20? Where is the 30 billion? Where are all these checks going to come from, Jenny? I mean, I know that he's making a lot of money.
They're coming from operating cash flow.
But they don't have that
okay,
much.
so Jim,
If you decide to cut price on everything.
Absolutely.
No.
Jim, they made $21 billion of free cash flow in 2020.
Well, they'll need every penny of that to do what he's talking about. Yes, that's a lot, but they'll need every penny of that to do what he's talking about.
Even after, Jim,
hey, Jim?
even after
building Silicon, Ohio?
Guys, even after spending.
Jim, let me ask you this before I let you go.
Even after CapEx spending in 2020. Okay.
Let me ask you this.
Can I just say one thing?
I don't mean to be. Look, Jenny, you're terrific. I don't mean to be this. I'm not one of those guys who wants to come on and throw a bomb. I am saying that I am both impressed and depressed by Pat. I mean, I'm impressed that he wants to do so.
I hear you, but can I say two things?
Excuse me?
Go ahead, Jenny.
Just two things on that. So even after their spending, even after their CapEx spending in 2023, after that, they're still going to have $2.7 billion of free cash flow left. So, Jim, they're not spending every penny. They're not spending more than everything they've got. And I just view it one step differently, too. When you say he wants to make America great again and he's doing this to try to do that, I look at that differently. I look at him saying, holy smokes, we just got a huge awakening on how big the problem is globally for semiconductors, for the semi supply chain at all ends. Like, let's fill a need. Let's fill a need that we desperately need. I don't think it's this messianic thing. I think it's filling the need the same way you and I do in our businesses.
To Jim's point, I think you guys are saying essentially the same thing. I think it comes down to that. Jim, let me ask you real quick, and then I got to go.
It's the cost may be higher than Jenny thinks. Right. I think it would be great if he could keep it within his cash flow.
And at the end of the day, I think to your point, is the end of the day, the exact motivation can always be debatable, but at the end of the day, the cost can't be. It's going to be one thing or the other.
Well, I mean, the main reason I call it is that you always have to be worried that people think that, wow, he could really hurt AMD. In the short term, maybe he can. I think that we should ask Pat what he feels about how much he has to, whether he's worried about the spend if we have a downturn. That's what I think.
And Jim, to the point that you threw out this morning, which, again, really caught my attention, this idea of a dividend cut. How likely do you think something like that is? Now, obviously, it's just speculation, of course, but it's the kind of thing that you think about when talking about and recommending stocks to people.
Well, I just think that what you have to look, he might, obviously doesn't want to do that, but the amount of money he's talking about is so great that I think we should ask him if it's necessary, if necessary, would he cut the dividend? That's what we need to ask Pat. If necessary, is the dividend sacrosanct, or is the build-out of Silicon, Ohio sacrosanct? That's all I want to know.
And I think those are valid points.
Yeah, right? And I love, by the way, overtime. I love it.
We got to have you back. I think that part of this may be replayed in overtime, and we may pull the conversation forward.
Well, you do that. I'm back if you need me. All right, buddy?
You're always welcome in overtime.
All right, thank you.
That's Jim Cramer. We'll see you tonight.
Thank you. I love you. Don't be mad. Okay?
Here, Jim. Oh, I'm not. I love sparring. Okay. Josh knows I love a good spar.
That's all I need to know. I didn't want to hang up on a bad note. Thank you, guys.
No, you're the best. I appreciate it. Yeah, as I said, you're welcome here anytime and overtime, obviously.